Chapter 1 The Return Home.
On the journey home, the crew continued investigating the strange objects from the cache in the Uamri forest. As Mezi sparred Jian using the spear, nothing seemed unusual until Satara watched the match in the mirror and noticed the spearhead seemed to flash with each strike she landed. The goblets and bowl proved more mysterious. After trying out different spirits, Satara filled one of the cups with seawater, which seemed to make it drinkable, if not entirely purified. For his next test, Kasumi retrieved 2 vials from his belongings. Giving one to Akash, he emptied the other into his glass before draining it. It did not take long before Kasumi began convulsing and foaming at the mouth. As the crew realized what he had ingested, Akash quickly administered the second vial. With Diallo's assistance, Kasumi stabilized, though he still seemed rather ill. When looking upon him with the mirror, Satara noted, with a chill, that Kasumi's complexion had taken on a deathly pallor. He confirmed that the mild poison he had imbibed had a much stronger effect than it should have, and that concluded their experiments for the trip.
On the 26th of the second moon, Viz Leany arrived back in the city of sails. As they approached Alim's shipyard, Akash joyfully flew out to the dock ahead of the ship. While the crew were glad to return home, their cheer was somewhat muted by the bittersweet memories of those they had lost. Alim came out to greet the ship and welcome her crew home, though his attitude quickly turned terse upon learning of the deaths of the crew members. Dismissing the captain, he informed her he would contact her once he had spoken with the crew. Heading into town, the crew stopped in the Purple Lantern Inn. They found it more upscale than when they last visited, largely due to investments by Akash's brother, Tabari. After introductions were made, they dined together, enjoying the new atmosphere and trying to keep Satara distracted from her subdued mood. Later that evening, a messenger arrived with an invitation to dine at Alim's home in 2 days' time. After spending a couple of days reacquainting themselves with the city, the crew arrived at Alim's home for dinner. He welcomed them in, apologizing for his curt manner when they arrived back in port. He reassured the captain that the crew had spoken very highly of her skill and leadership, and bore her no ill will for the deaths of the crew to the Tato enslavers. Satara expressed her wish to hold a remembrance for the fallen crew, for the sake of their families. Alim agreed such a gesture would be appreciated, and offered to host the event. Moving on to less somber topics, the party regaled their patron with tales of their exploits, and showed off their various acquisitions. After much discussion, Alim chose to keep several of the artifacts, though he left them the Mon, the spear, and the Batiri Cerule, much to Kasumi, Mezi, and Akash's relief. Over the next few days, the party made preparations for the remembrance, including calling on the families of Namat and Shakil. As for Kamal, Satara had learned before from Emrys that his best friend had no family. They visited Namat's home first, and the captain spoke with his son, who appeared to be in his young teens. Though obviously upset, the young man bore it well and agreed to bring his mother to the remembrance. Next, they went to the home of Shakil's sister, Thara, but there was no answer. Her neighbor informed them that she would likely not return home until late that evening. Deciding to bide their time nearby, they returned later to see a young woman enter the home. After they knocked on the door, the young woman answered, confirming she was indeed Thara. The captain introduced herself and the party, explaining the reason for their visit. After a brief exchange, Thara angrily accused her of being responsible for Shakil's untimely death before throwing a mean right hook at the captain, who made no move to avoid the blow. Mezi rushed between them, taking a solid hit for the captain. Taken aback, Thara stared at them before slamming the door. Faced with such wrath, something inside the captain broke. Satara sobbed through the door that Thara was right, she was to blame, that she deserved it, and begged her to come back. Giving in to her repressed guilt over the deaths of her crew, she collapsed against the door, weeping. As Mezi helped her friend up, she thought she heard the sounds of stifled crying through the door. After getting Satara back to her room at the inn, the party settled in for an unquiet evening.
The next morning, Mezi found the captain and Kanuki eating breakfast downstairs. In an attempt to lighten Sitara's mood, the three went shopping in the Grand Bazaar. Finding a rare and exotic pet purveyor named Peruse, Sitara decided to buy a new pet for Kanuki as he had grown attached to Grim and seemed to miss the hawk. After a couple of false starts, Kanuki found a four-legged beast with a silver back and black fur that appeared unbothered by his attentions or by much of anything.
The day before the remembrance, the party realized they had not seen Emrys since they made port. Worrying about his state of mind after losing a close friend during the fight against the slavers, the party split up and began searching the city. Kasumi found a trail of inns and taverns Emrys seemed to be working his way through, including one which had seen him thrown out by a group of young men. After a bit of questioning, Kasumi realized the youth had taken Emrys out in protest of his singing, but had ended up worse for their trouble. Eventually, he found Emrys deep in his drink. Kasumi realized that he was likely the worst possible person to find Emrys in a time of emotional turmoil, yet he was determined to try and console his shipmate. Though his attempt went poorly, Kasumi was able to convince Emrys that it was time to leave. The youths approached, brandishing threats, but ultimately decided against anything more when faced with the rest of the crew, who walked past them and escorted Emrys back to the Purple Lantern. Having left Emrys in one of their rooms to sleep it off, Akash's disdainful reaction to his drunkenness sparked a tense conversation. When Sitara defended her grieving crewmate and friend, Akash chastised her for losing her own composure outside Thara's house. Conveying the depths of her own sorrow and remorse, Sitara revealed that she still felt plagued by guilt about the men she had assumed responsibility for, who had followed her to their deaths. Seeming to not comprehend, Akash insisted he did not share those feelings of loss and grief, further admitting that he was unsure of his concern for the crew. In a moment of uncharacteristic passion, Kasumi struck Akash with a savage blow in response. Feeling betrayed, Akash exploded at Kasumi before storming off. Kasumi, realizing what he needed to say to Akash, followed him downstairs. After Kasumi confronted Akash about his friend's concern for him, Akash realized he was not the uncaring man he feared himself to be. With their tempers and worries settled, the two friends renewed their commitment to each other and the crew.
Sitara and Mezi, still flabbergasted by the exchange, took a nightcap with the innkeep before settling into bed. The next morning, Sitara checked in on Emrys, finding him awake and contemplative. She asked if he could look over what she had composed for the evening's remembrance, and whether he felt he was up for it. He assured the captain he would be ready, and she joined the rest of the crew going about their business to prepare for the night's event. That evening, the party gathered with the rest of the crew, their families, and Alim's workers to celebrate the lives of their fallen companions. Sitara and Emrys performed an elegy set to music together, and Emrys then sang of the lives of his companions. Members of the crew spoke of their travels, and Namat's son, Rahman, stepped forth as well to speak proudly of his father's brave deeds. Sitara noticed Shaquille's sister slip in during the performances, though she remained at the back, watching and listening quietly. After the ceremonies, she approached the captain. Following a long, tense moment, Thara admitted she did not blame the captain for Shaquille's death, then surprised everyone by declaring she would join the crew, to see what her brother thought was worth his life. After considering the determined young woman, Sitara extended her arm, welcoming Thara to the crew.
Off to the side, an attractive young woman approached Kasumi. After some veiled comments that set him on edge, she extracted a promise from Kasumi to watch after Jyotish and keep him out of trouble. Realizing he was speaking to Jyotish's wife, and that she was very concerned her husband may not return from their adventures, Kasumi agreed to watch after his fellow accountant for his wife's sake, and for their possible child.
Late in the evening, Sitara and Akash noticed a pair of gentlemen had arrived and were speaking with Alim. Recognizing Captains Hana and Ranbir, Sitara and Akash made their way over. After greeting their friends warmly, the captains offered their consolations for the deaths of the crew, some of whom were known to them. Their conversation soon turned grim, as they shared rumors of Tatoan ships attacking Ashib merchant vessels. Perplexed, Sitara and Akash asked why Rakosis had not yet done something about it. It was well known that while the Grand Vizier ruled the city in title, the backing of the nobles was fickle at best, and would likely remain so until someone gained enough support from the houses or the priesthood to claim the office of Sultan or Caliph. Though trade, shipping, and naval matters fell under the jurisdiction of the Council of Captains, Hana and Ranbi revealed that even they were in a state of flux, ever since the death of the eldest captain, Amir al-Bar Aden bin Tariq Musa, the man who had discovered the New World. The captains explained that, with the city's governing structures in such disarray, any unified response to the threat would be impossible. After some musing, the discussion turned to lighter subjects. The two captains inquired about the crew's adventures abroad, and were rewarded with rousing tales of adventure, which had not come as a surprise to either man. Finally, the evening drew to a close, and a sense of peace settled over those who had gathered as they took their leave and returned to their homes.